Thank you. And last but not least, Ben Morley.
Hi, Ben Morley, Head of Programmes and Accountable Body. I work with Enablers team.
Thank you. I think that's everybody now. Any apologies for absence, John?
Yes, Chair, I've had apologies from Councillors Chris Rosling-Josephs, with Councillor Anne Murphy subbing, as she's indicated, and from Councillor Diane Hurst.
Thank you, John. Item 3, exclusion of public and press, which we do not need to do today. Is that correct, John?
Yeah. That's correct, Chair.
Number 4, item 4 is declarations of interest. Do we have anybody that wants to express any declarations of interest? Councillor Miskell?
Chair, I should declare an interest as Cabinet Member Mazza Iqbal's Cabinet Assistant.
Thank you, that'll be noted. Anybody else? No. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. To approve the minutes of the committee held on the 19th of January 2021. Can we all agree that they are a true record? Councillor Richards?
Yes, agreed.
Thank you. Right, is there any matters arising from these minutes? We all are okay with everything on there? I don't see anybody indicating. So, they're all fine, and we can agree there for John to carry on with them. Item 6, do we have any public questions and petitions today?
Yeah, I haven't received any.
Okay, thank you. So that leads us to item 7, which is the COVID business response and recovery planning. And we've got the report, and we have the officers here. Who wants to start? Is it Ed? Oh, sorry, Councillor Iqbal.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I said earlier, thank you for the invitation, Chair. I know, sorry, I couldn't make the November meeting when the business recovery group met, came and provided an update. So today, after 6 months, you've asked us to, almost 6 months, you've asked us to come back. So I'm hoping colleagues have had an opportunity to go through the presentation, Chair. So I was hoping we could go into what members wanted to talk about. I mean, we can go through the presentation, which could take about 10-15 minutes. I was hoping if colleagues have had the opportunity to read the presentation, it'd be good to hear from members what they'd like to ask.
That's fine, thank you, Councillor Iqbal. That's fine with me. We've all had the papers and we'll have read them. So, Councillor Smith, you've indicated.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to get, as you said, the 10 to 15 minute or the short version, just in case members of the public are logged on at the moment, or maybe logging on in future, just to give them the full picture and the background. Thank you.
Okay, does Ed want? Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think in light of the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, perhaps there may be things that Ed wants to update on his report as well. Thank you, Chair.
Just through you, Chair. I mean, we were discussing this this morning with my cabinet colleagues and senior officers. Obviously, the Prime Minister made his announcement and set out the road plan. We've not had the finer details. We'll pick up if there are any questions regarding that, but we need to now digest that information, Chair, and understand what that means, and there's further detailed promise. If you heard the Prime Minister yesterday, there was a number of members of Parliament that asked the question regarding support for certain sectors, for example, furlough. What support is the hospitality sector going to have regarding the VAT cut, business rates? and the Prime Minister responded and said the Chancellor in his budget will be outlining that support. So that's an example of, yes, the information was published last night, but with very, very little detail. So more than happy to come back or provide a briefing note, Chair, to members once we've been able to digest that information, understand it, and then more than happy to send something to you which you could circulate to this board chair. But if we let Edward do a very quick whistle-top tour of the presentation, and then we'll take some questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. That would be useful. And it was on the news this morning that the detail hasn't been worked out as yet. So you're quite right in highlighting that. So a briefing note whenever it's available would be appreciated. Thank you. Ed?
Okay, right. So as we said then, I will try and go through these really quickly. I won't tell you everything that's on the screen in front of you, but I'll just kind of go through it for context quite briefly. If I spent just a minute on each slide, I think too much of the time would be spent on this and not enough time on discussion. Ben and Richard will probably kind of chip in, probably more in the questions, because there's elements of this that they're deeply involved in. So what I'm going to cover is just a little bit of context since we last met, what some of the live business impacts are, and frankly what we're doing about it, how that breaks down in terms of some of the grant programs and some of the other things that we're doing as a council and as a wider partnership, and then at the end just some wider reflections on where we are and what we've got ahead of us. So just to recap, as you know, we had the first national lockdown where we administered nearly 2,000 grants totaling over 100 and odd million pounds. We then had a short period over the summer where it felt like we were opening up, and then we went into another series of lockdowns with the tier restrictions, and then now the national lockdown and the third national lockdown. In terms of the business impacts, we continue obviously to be very, very concerned around the business impact and what the knock-on consequences for jobs and families in Sheffield. We are in the process of going out for our third survey. Whilst we are mindful that we don't want to bombard businesses with surveys when they're busy trying to run their businesses and try and fight for their own survival, it is really important that we have live, accurate feedback. Perhaps unsurprisingly, overwhelmingly, the big feedback is around cash flow. So, you know, lack of demand, lack of footfall, reduction in sales, social distancing or closures affecting their ability to trade. Ultimately, cash being the big issue. And whilst the benefits of business rate reduction and furlough and the grant regimes are welcome, a lot of businesses are on life support in effect. They're being kept alive by grant funding and by the furlough scheme. And the big question is what happens when furlough ends, and a big concern that businesses that are probably just surviving just at the moment might not be here when the recovery starts, and all the knock-on consequences that will mean for unemployment. Unemployment data was released again today. It's massively masked by the furlough scheme. The effective real unemployment is far higher than is in the statistics currently. We said this last time, but the impacts are not the same universally. There are some sectors that are doing well. There are some sectors that are being really badly affected. What I would highlight really is that a lot of the sectors that are really important for the overall vibrancy and attractiveness of our city, so retail, leisure, hospitality, visitor economy, they are the sectors that have been most adversely affected. They are the sectors that have been closed longest. They are the sectors that are going to be the last to reopen and recover. They are also critically the sectors where there's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of low pay and secure work, there's a lot of young people employed. And so, you know, the differential impact of these sectors and its impact on our population is something that is a real significant concern. So yes, it's brilliant that there's hopefully light at the end of the tunnel, but for some of these sectors, they are not going to recover at the same time. In terms of the city centre impacts, there's a dashboard there around the decline in footfall. Sheffield city centre in particular has been massively affected by declining footfall with the loss of the commuter flows. That is pretty much in keeping with national and core city averages. There are then some real positives in terms of we managed to keep them more open and trading safely. Big thing there around the changing nature of retail and all the closures that you've heard on the news. There's a big exposure to things like Debenhams and some of the Arcadia group, so Fargate and the Moor, and what the impact on the accelerated changes to the retail sector mean for our city centre, and vacancies and meanwhile uses and alternative uses for city centre. That is a huge topic in its own right. Like all places and big cities, we have got some significant vulnerabilities around some of those brands that are coming off the high street and what happens next. But then positive work around things like the Business Improvement District and CCTV and what we're doing to help. Though again, we might come into that in discussion, and Richard can help. Big section on grants. It is complicated. There is a lot of different sources of support. So again, I won't sort of labour this now, but for information, here are the national grants which are available, which are being administered locally for people that are either forced to close or open but severely restricted, specific sectors such as nightclubs and pubs, and then an enhanced lockdown payment for accommodation, hospitality and leisure. So that's the national menu of grant regimes. And on top of that, there are additional restrictions grants for places like Sheffield that had tier 2 restrictions for a period of time, tier 3, and then national lockdown, back out to 3. So the takeaway here is if a business applies, we will retrospectively apply all the grants that they're entitled to cover these periods of restriction. So the overwhelming message to a business is please get in touch. If you're not sure whether you're eligible, please get in touch and we will work out what you're eligible for and get as much of this complexity sorted for you as possible. There are then this additional restrictions grant. So the city region negotiated £30 million as part of its negotiations to enter into the tier 3 arrangements before Christmas. Feels like a long time ago. What we've been able to do with that £30 million is really marry and match up those national schemes that are for ratepayers at a local level for non-rate payers. So some of this money is being used to make sure that if you're a non-rate payer, say your landlord pays your rates for you as part of an all-inclusive rental deal, you still have access to the same level of benefits that the rate payers have. We've also done work around supply chain. So obviously you might be technically legally open, but you're a part of a supply chain that has got, your main purchaser is closed, so you are effectively closed too. The supply chain support grants, specific top-ups and support for the worst affected sectors such as hospitality, accommodation, entertainment, and then more recently grants for home workers, home-based businesses that don't have fixed property costs necessarily but are also adversely affected. So again, you get a sense of there is a layering of different grant regimes, which is great on the one hand because it's supporting more and more businesses. It's complicated though, and the communication is what we talked about previously about making sure that businesses know about it and are able to access it. But there is still a massive grant regime that we are administering as the local authority. What we have done is work really, really hard on the front end and the application process. So I believe, I think I've said this before, if you went on our website and then you compared it to some other authorities up and down the country, I really hope you would find ours a bit more user-friendly. There are some, for example, where the user has to basically navigate all of that themselves. Ours is a bit more led on customer journeys. So it took us a little bit longer, a week to 10 days longer to get some of these schemes live. But what we believe is that that's paying dividends in terms of the ease and the access for our businesses rather than having to navigate it all themselves. There is a much more intuitive and logical way through our grant programs, we think. But having said that, it is still complex, hence why the message is pick up the phone, speak to an advisor, and we'll help you through it. We talked about comms last time. I won't go through all of these, but just to say we have really done everything we can think of around the comms. You might have heard stuff on the radio or print, hard copy, social media. Again, my open call is if there's anything you can think of in your wards that you think would make a difference, please get in touch and we will do it. But that's just a breakdown of some of the things we have done. It's not just about grants, there is wider support to businesses. So these are just some metrics around the Business Sheffield helpline. So down in the bottom right, you get a sense of the number of calls coming through, how many of them are answered first time, what the average call waiting time is, and so on. So, high volumes of of calls into Business Sheffield asking for information, signposting, advice or help with grants, and that they lead to referrals to one-to-one business advisors who are able to sit down and really try and understand what the business is up to and lend practical support, managing cash flow, managing the different understanding the legal closures and the government guidelines. Over 4,000 one-to-one advisor sessions coming out of some of these calls to Business Sheffield. So we've scaled up massively, I suppose, is the point, to deal with this unprecedented demand and pressure on businesses. We speak to what we call our key accounts, our larger employees in the city. We speak to them on a very regular basis and understand where they're up to. We've had a specific focus around hospitality, accommodation and leisure, given the, as I've said, the significant impacts that sector is facing, in addition to all the other things we've talked about. The business response group that you've met people from there before, that continues to meet on a fortnightly basis and continues to be really helpful as we try and move from not just the immediate relief measures, but into the longer term recovery planning. And so binding together all the different bits of the city, the chamber, the property association, the universities, into a group that's kind of working together has been really, really positive. We are looking at recovery planning, whilst it probably starts to now feel in the announcements yesterday that recovery is hopefully on its way. I think really strongly the more we can plan and intervene for recovery, the stronger that recovery will be, the better it will be for people in Sheffield. So this is obviously dates when we read the slides. As Mazza said, we are still digesting the roadmap and exactly what it means. We can circulate things on that in more detail. We already know, for example, there's an extension of the grant regimes. Luckily, Ben might correct me if I'm wrong here, not new additional grants to add to the complexity, but just the extensions in time that obviously now would mean the support to businesses that are remaining closed is now aligned with the roadmap that Boris announced yesterday. I've mentioned where we are particularly concerned around cliff edges, the ending of furlough, and the debt-laden businesses that are going to come out of life support effectively at some point, hopefully in the next few months. And the big thing really around some of our job is to create the confidence and stimulate demand so that when it's safe to do so, whether it's our high streets, our city centre, or whether it's the visitor economy and the nighttime economy, safely stimulating demand when the time is right, so that businesses that have survived are then hopefully able to adapt and trade their way out of it is a massive area for us, and things we can do that will make a real difference. I won't go through that in too much detail. That's just a specific example of where we've got some real targeted activity planned and underway around hospitality and culture reopening when the time's right, but thinking and planning and talking to the sector so that we're helping them adapt so that when they're able to open, they can be as sustainable and as viable as possible. I've mentioned before, but just again to flag, the information officers I think have been really, really impactful and well received. They're currently funded by an ERDF project. We've committed to extending that so that support, that practical support to help businesses is still there. That support can flex and adapt according to the national situation at the moment. Obviously, it's very focused on the lockdown and the guidance and the rules. Hopefully, over time, that can then be much more about adaptation and new business strategies and moving forwards, but that is a really valuable resource in Sheffield that isn't there in other parts of the sub-region or the country, but we think is a really positive step and has been well received. And they're very, very active, running workshops, those kind of things. I think last time we came, we were in the process of getting approvals and establishing the recovery fund. That's now moved on a bit. We've obviously, with the national lockdown, it didn't feel quite right to be launching a recovery fund. So we've not pushed the button on some of the external promotion and inviting proposals for that yet. That's sort of held a little bit on ice over sort of the December period, January period. But in the background, we've got the steering group up and running, we've got the criteria ready, we've got the comms ready to go, we've got the application process ready to go. There'll be a small grant pot that's running all the time that people can apply for, and there will be a larger fund, larger applications that we will give people a window to come back to us with their ideas, and we will then work across the council to take forward their ideas in their local areas. So progress on that, and the sort of the formal launch and getting people thinking about recovery, the time sort of feels right now. This is my last slide. So again, this is huge in its own right. So just wider implications, all of that stuff's really, really important. But what we are really concerned about going forward is, as I've talked about, is some of the sectors that we've relied on in the past for job growth are exactly the sectors that have been most affected by COVID and the sectors that are forecast to make the slowest recovery. So there's a whole conversation needed at the city region level, at the national level, about jobs-led recovery and where good quality jobs can come from, so that we don't just grow back, you know, insecure, poor pay, poor conditions, but actually we really do have a strategy for good quality job growth. Big challenges in that, in terms of the trends that have just, COVID has just accelerated around automation and digitization. How do we need to invest in our skill system so that people are more, you know, digitally savvy, more able to cope in a new world? You've heard it all before, but COVID probably has just accelerated trends that were happening anyway, but it's just meant they've happened in a year rather than in 5 or 10 years. We've all got to catch up with our young people, people leaving school and college, our people that have been recently made unemployed. We've got to help people respond and reskill and retrain into this new world that we're emerging into. We all know that COVID has deepened inequality in the city, so we need to not just focus on the here and now, but absolutely focus on the long-term causes and drivers of inequality in our city, more now than ever. Youth unemployment, you know, what is happening to youth unemployment, avoiding a lost generation, particularly given that point about sectors where a lot of people historically young people have always historically been employed in big numbers in retail, leisure, hospitality, entertainment, the very sectors that have been most adversely affected from COVID and may never recover to the same level. So where are young people going to get their first entry into the labour market, the skills, and then the pathways on to other employment? City centre vibrancy, we can talk about that, Richard can talk about that, but critical that we get that consumer confidence, and not just the city centre, but there is an opportunity or a kind of a potential strengthening, I think, of the role of local and district centres, your ability to walk to a local shop, to have a grocer, a newsagent, a convenience store, you know, has, I think, really reconnected with people in COVID in a way that perhaps wasn't there before. What can we do to build on that and to retain and grow that in the city, so that our district centres become much more desirable, responsive community assets than perhaps they might otherwise be? And then things like the office market, you know, again, I think anyone that tells you that they know what's going to happen to the office market is probably overstating it. We need to see what the long-term trends are for ourselves as an organisation and for the rest of the city, and what does that mean for major city centre developments. I think there's lots of different views on that, but whatever happens, we need to flex and adapt and have an offer that is relevant to the marketplace post-COVID in a way that perhaps we wouldn't have imagined previously. So I suppose the point of this slide was just to really say, you know, whilst there is a huge amount of work on the here and now and the relief phases and the support to businesses, all of that is just so that as many businesses as possible are still trading and still employing people when the COVID restrictions are lifted. That's a lot of hard work, but it's not enough. That's just the first base. These are the sorts of issues that we really need to be focusing on the long term, hopefully from a position where businesses are being supported to sustain employment and still be viable when the restrictions are lifted. So sorry, that was long. I knew it was going to be long, but that's the presentation, and the discussion, I think, we'll probe into that more.
Thank you, Ed. Does Richard or Ben want to add anything further?
I think, Chair, that was quite comprehensive. We'll just respond to questions, if that's all right.
That's fine. Thank you very much. We have the first question from Councillor Richards, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Edward. Bit scary, isn't it, looking at what's happened and what's in front of us. And I suppose I was thinking in terms of, we've been doing a lot of work around laptops for kids, and what we need to be looking at, I guess, particularly with the cliff edge you mentioned of furlough coming up towards us, is about the skilling of people, upskilling of people who have worked and are now going to have to learn completely new skills. I know from my volunteering at Ecclesfield Library, where we've had people coming in to use the computers, how few of them have the skills to be able to find their way round. And in a sense, children already know their way round. You know, we all have the 3-year-olds who can find Peppa Pig on a laptop within 30 seconds, but we don't, we have adults who don't have those same sort of skills. It's not innate somehow, is it? So what are we going to be doing about that to upskill our city? Is it something we'll be doing in conjunction with region? And are we preparing now to sort of get centres and things? Are we working with either the university or indeed Sheffield College to try to get this sort of moving? Because being a city of skilled people is what's going to help us, isn't it?
Just before Edward comes in, Chair, if I could just quickly provide a short response. If my colleague Councillor Abdsam Mohammed was here, the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, she'd say very recently, I think it's been a matter of weeks, where we've gone out to consult on the education and employment skills strategy. So that's a piece of work that's been going on for at least 2 years. And you're right, Councillor Richards, we are working very closely with the city region. In the presentation, we didn't mention the work we are doing with the city region and the local enterprise partnership. They've come up with 2 documents, which Edward will go into. One is called the CEP, which is the economic strategy, and which is being led by the local enterprise partnership. And then we've got the renewal action plan, which is being led by the city region. So I don't know if Edward wants to pick up from there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important point around the reskilling and retraining, and particularly the digital skills. I mean, I think one of the history tells you that one of the things a recession does is robs people of confidence, really. So there's a massive issue of people that have perhaps lost their job having the confidence, the resilience, and the support to retrain and find something else. Historically, recessions do have a massive impact on people, and it can knock their confidence to give things a try. And so I think the whole issue about the skill strategy, as Mazza said, we've got the local skill strategy and some local plans and initiatives underway. There will be a strong link into the region because, frankly, that's where a lot of the funding is going to have to come from. It's not something that the City Council can fund alone, but there would be kind of local delivery based on the ground through Sheffield, but linked into a wider strategy for the region and hopefully securing additional funds in that way. I think the whole issue around skills and retraining might be something that Councillor Mohammed and Andrew Jones, the Director of Lifelong Learning and Skills, might want to come back and talk to you about in more detail.
But the issue you raised, Councillor Richard, regarding having the right tools, so as you said, laptop for kids, both my sisters teach at Sheffield College, and recently they've now rolled out where they can tablets and laptops. For example, kids she teaches, I'll use Manor as an example, she has a couple of kids from the Manor, and they've been having to do their coursework and everything on a mobile phone. They've not had the internet, enough data, so there's a cost factor there. So it's good to see that the FE, the colleges have stepped up. But again, I have no idea if that is widespread, as as every vulnerable young person or adult who goes to college have access to the kit and the data. So there is a piece of work. Our colleague, Councillor Terry Fox, he's taken a city-wide approach on this, on the digital divide. So it's not just looking for what we can provide to our school pupils, but also looking at wider afield, not those that just attend college, but those that do adult skills and so forth. So there's a huge challenge, how we ensure that the right people get the right support, and it falls back down to having the cash resource to do that. But it is a huge issue.
Can I just come back, please, Chair. I just wanted to know what sort of timescale, because with this cliff edge looming, if you like, I just want to make sure that we're up and ready to be working with the people who are going to need that support as soon as they need it, rather than saying, well, our strategy will be ready next year, so can you just hang on a bit?
We are running workshops. I mean, I remember Councillor Abdeslam this morning mentioning digital boot camps, if that's the right word. They're short courses in reskilling, and there's more and more of that an offer. And you're right, Councillor Richards, that'll need escalating up. We'll need to do it at a larger scale. And but I don't know if Edward has more information on what the institution's proposing.
No, I mean, I think it's a huge area that I think Andrew Jones should come back and talk to you about. But no, I think the skills machinery is swinging into action, so that as much is in place now as possible. But that is going to need to grow over time. So it's absolutely not about waiting till a strategy is signed off and things come in, a year's time. I think as much effort as possible to get things up and running and live now, but with the knowledge that there is going to be more demand over the next period, not just this year, but into the next few years, than the system is going to be able to cope with. So it's going to need additional resource. It's going to need additional thinking, and that's where some of those longer term things come in. But there is stuff ramping up rapidly now to try and meet as much of that demand as possible within the resources we've got.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, and can I thank Mr. Highfield for his presentation as well, please? A couple of questions and a comment. I mean, the question from me is there's quite a number of businesses which operate out of City Council properties, and we do have quite a large commercial estate. And clearly there are liabilities that we can help them with, such as rent, holidays, and basically not enforcing landlord and tenant obligations, etc., which clearly some of them will be in breach of because of the pandemic we're going through. There's two things here. One is how we are actually helping them on the properties that they rent from us, because clearly they are businesses that we need to support. And secondly, as part of that question, and it's slightly wider than that, is a lot of people do rent from private sector landlords as well. And I know and I understand that people have been looking towards the City Council in trying to bridge some sort of relationship with private landlords in order to help them not enforce certain conditions, because I know in residential properties, basically you're not allowed to evict, but in commercial properties, I think we're getting to the stage where people are running out of, I don't know, not so much the patience, but running out of options as landlords as well, because landlords themselves also have mortgages to pay as well. So it's not as easy as that they can actually give rent-free periods as easily as possibly we can. So the question is, number one, what are we doing with our own tenants? And question number two is, how are we trying to help landlords and tenants in the private sector? So that's one question. And the second one, the second area, if I may, Chair, is around the arts, culture and entertainment industry. I know Mr. Highfield's touched upon it and others have as well. I mean, this is well embedded in our community in Sheffield, and we're very proud of the fact that we have this industry in Sheffield. And clearly, a lot of these people will be suffering quite disproportionately compared to other people because they're not being able to do anything. What are we doing over and above what the government is tooling us to do in order to support that industry further than others? Because I think it's more important to our the Sheffield identity probably than in other cities. And another question, sorry if I may, Chair, if I carry on, and I'll stop because I won't ask any more questions in the rest of the presentation. Sorry. The other one is there have been many stories of people being grant funded with dormant companies, etc., etc. The government have already said that this has become a big issue, and they're expecting it to be a really high percentage where people have been, dare I say it, I don't want to raise it here, but I'm being devil's advocate here, is they're claiming when they shouldn't be. Presumably, we have some sort of checks and measures in place, bearing in mind that we have to have speed as well in order to spot this. And I know we've been quite diligent on that side of things. And a comment is, I'm glad Mr. Highfield is accepting the fact that the office market is something that we've got to keep our eye on and see how the future pans out for the office market. Maybe the offices may be turned into residential properties, etc. But that was just a comment, and I thank you for that. I think I've got most of them in there, Chair. If I do have any more, I do reserve the right to come back if I may, although I've said what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maroof.
If I take the first one, because I remember, I think it was leader of the opposition who asked the question at full council very recently. I mean, be you a commercial tenant or a voluntary sector organisation, if you're in one of our properties, we came out very clear at the beginning and said, get in touch and we'll deal each individual case by its own merit. So we have gone out there, supported not just the business community, but also the voluntary and community faith sector as well, because they rent a number of buildings. So each business or each group that's approached the council, we have provided support. I mean, the figure that I've got here is there were 29 deferments and 7 rent suspensions. I haven't got the details of the businesses, but that's the process we have gone through, Chair. So hopefully that answers that question. Regarding the commercial element, it was highlighted, I think, yesterday by the CBI, where they were saying, you know, once this moratorium of evictions ends, and we know this is the quarter which is going to be quite challenging for businesses, and as you rightly recognise, for landlords as well, a bit very similar to that furlough scheme. Once that moratorium ends, the grant support disappears, then yes, it's going to be a huge challenge. As Edward said, he mentioned 2 of the big stores there, Debenhams and the Arcadia Group, Dorothy Perkins and others. And we've seen Aviva, I think it was, based on Ecclesall Road, which went out there, consulted with its staff and said, we now want to move, rather than working from office, we'd like our staff to work from home. So, you know, businesses are taking that individual decision to either continue to be based in a building, or they're moving staff into working from home, very similar to what we're doing. So, I mean, the picture isn't very clear yet, but we know that there's a huge challenge out there, and it is going to be, I kid you not, very, very difficult time over the next few months. The ending of this grants and support for businesses, the 5% that they pay on VAT, if that goes back up in 3 months, there are huge challenges, not just rent, but as Edward said, cash flow, wages and everything else. So for me, it's just looking at I mean, we can provide support as we have done to our own tenants. The grant regimes provide that bit of support to pay for the rents and overhead costs. But once that tap is stopped, turned off, then it's going to be really, really difficult for businesses out there. I don't know if Edward wants to add anything.
No, so just on the other questions. So question 2 was around arts, culture, entertainment. What have we done? So you're absolutely right. Sheffield's cultural sector is characterised by more smaller freelance or micro enterprises than a lot of core cities. So whilst it's really important that we've been trying to help some of the bigger venues access Arts Council funding, and there's been some big awards supporting the sector in Sheffield in that regard, what we've also done is look towards a freelancers fund The freelancers, perhaps they're self-employed, working from home, have been missed by some of the national grant programs. So working alongside the university, Professor Vanessa, the Cultural Consortium, we had the idea, or they had the idea, of not just having a grant program, but actually rather than giving them a grant, give them a commission. So pay them to produce some creative content, some material. In effect, it's the same. It's giving them some money to tide them over, but it's a much more positive way of getting the money to them. So there is a cultural consortium, council-backed fund that is being made available to the freelancers in the creative economy on a commission basis, which is funded by us. One of the other things we've done, for example, is look at the home-based businesses. So not all areas have used their ARG discretionary funding to cover home-based businesses. A lot of the government rules and the way these grants have been administered are around fixed property costs. The rationale for that is that furlough's helping with your workforce costs, suspension in business rates is dealing with some of your other costs, but you're still paying rent on a building. So the grants are often pegged against fixed property costs. There's a logic to that, but it misses people that are, perhaps working from home in a spare bedroom, whatever. They still got a cost, it's their mortgage, but their business might well be suffering from massive loss of demand and they're struggling. So we've used some of our discretionary funds to target home-based workers and freelancers in a way that not all places up and down the country have. So there's some tangible things we've done in response to question 2. And on 3, grants going to dormant companies. Yeah, as you say, there is a balance here to be struck between getting the money out the door quickly and checking and double checking absolutely everything. I think overwhelmingly we are trying to get the money out the door to eligible businesses as quickly as possible. We do get some claims that don't add up, and we will investigate them more. Whereas the national schemes, the guidance is really, really clear that they have been open on a certain date. They have to be trading. There has to be evidence of trading. If it truly was a dormant company, i.e. there was just no activity, nothing had happened, then I think we would spot that. But we are trying to be on the side of the businesses here, and if it fits the rules, get the money out to them as quickly as possible. So we are not taking a particularly heavy-handed approach to things. We are trying to be as prudent and as flexible as we can, but we are administering public money at the end of the day, and it needs to be done appropriately. So that balance is the heart of a lot of discussion. So I can't hand on heart say that 1 or 2 haven't crept through, but there are checks and balances in place, and ultimately there is the provision of clawback, where if the money has gone to the wrong person or the money has been paid in error, we do have the ability to claw that money back in extreme cases.
Just to add on the second point on the arts, culture and entertainment, as Edward said, we've used our discretionary grant the first time round. We made the government aware that this was a huge significant gap last year. I think I wrote to the business secretary in June of last year, got a response back saying, sorry, we can't give you any further cash. So it was a huge gap. And as Edward said, working with the sector, with the cultural consortium, which we have in Sheffield, working with them, identifying the freelancers that needed the support, and B, I'm grateful to the city region, our politicians, the leader of the council and our officers for enabling this scheme to happen, because those that are freelancers and the self-employed, as we keep here repeatedly on our TV screens, in the press, that it's a group of people that the government have forgotten. But here in Sheffield, we've taken a political decision to use that discretionary grant to support those businesses. And you'll have all have had emails, casework from all colleagues, regardless of what political persuasion, raising over a number of months, and a number of you have picked that up in your post bag, that this is a group of people that haven't been supported. And it's not huge amounts of money. It was about £1,000 we were making available, but that's all we've got to play with. If we had more, we could increase the amount we award to these freelancers and the self-employed. But as Edward had said in part of his presentation, now the work continues around renewal and how we reopen safely. We're working with Unite, which is the Nighttime Economy Group, the Cultural Consortium, South Yorkshire Camera, which is the pub group. So, you know, we are working with as many groups, stakeholders as we can to put a plan in place to ensure that we maximise what we can to build that confidence and encourage that footfall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Ed. I'd just like to say thanks very much to the officers who've been working hard on some of the activities that you just described. You described a lot, or provided a lot of detail on what I would call input measures, so the activities that are going on. But I agree with Councillor Richards that, you know, these are scary times. So I wonder, could you give us some more details, please, on some of the bigger macro impacts that we're seeing now? So I'm sure we've all seen the announcement this morning about the rise in unemployment, particularly hitting young people. So I'm just wondering if you could give us any information on what the change in unemployment level has been in Sheffield, how we're tracking that, particularly with regards to younger people. As you said, we don't want the lost generation. And kind of linked to that, your slide on critical interventions I thought was really interesting. But there wasn't any specific mention there about support for small companies and the critical interventions that the council are taking in that area. Because we know that if you look at the economy as a whole, many more people are employed in small businesses than are employed in large organisations. So I see critical interventions for big organisations. Can you tell us more about how the unemployment levels are moving, and also the critical interventions that we're taking for small business? Thank you.
Okay, as you know, we generally do, we've got a weekly economic tracker where we track some of the live indicators such as footfall and things that are changing on a regular basis. We also then track the national data sets when the data is released. I haven't got the specific figures at my fingertip. What I would say is unemployment generally in Sheffield is tracking the national averages, i.e. it has increased. But it's nowhere near increased the levels that we know is the true underlying position, because, as I said, of the furlough position. You know, there is still that cliff edge we talked about of people that are currently not classed as unemployed. They are furloughed, and the issue is there going to be a job for them to go back to? But unemployment in Sheffield is pretty much tracking the national average. It has increased markedly, but it's nowhere near shot up to the levels that were predicted yet. I haven't got the specific percentages and figures to me. I can put that in an email afterwards. We know, and then again, we know that is, you said, that is skewed towards younger people, in particular, kind of the 18 to 25 cohort is disproportionately affected in terms of the overall levels of unemployment. Other indicators, I agree with you in terms of the input measures, by the way. That's absolutely kind of where I focused on the presentation. Some of the macro impacts in terms of business failures and insolvencies, again, I personally don't believe they've fully come through in the data yet, because of the business rate holidays, because of the grant regimes, because of some of the relaxation in some of the insolvency rules. I think there's a lot of businesses struggling on, potentially taking on debt through some of the bounce back loans and business interruption loans, that when it's time to try and service those loans, that's when we will see the spikes in business insolvencies. So I don't think the true kind of outcome measures are really being felt in the data yet. So that's something that we need to watch very, very carefully going forward. In terms of the critical interventions for small businesses, I think that's probably my poor communication. Actually, almost everything that was on those slides is about small businesses, with the exception of the key account managers that we have around the larger businesses. Overwhelmingly, the people that the information officers are talking to, the people that our business advisors are talking to, the people that are coming on our workshops are small businesses, because that is our economy, as you said. So apologies if that didn't come through, but I would argue that the vast majority of our critical interventions are with small businesses.
And that's not just the council, both the universities and the Chamber of Commerce are working alongside us to provide that support. I know today's focus is on COVID, but for example, we were able to lever in some resource to support the Chamber. They've got a number of business advisors supporting small businesses through the complications of Brexit as well. I mean, that's the added challenge that businesses are facing as well. And one of the slides that Edward touched upon was the district centres. Again, that's supporting small businesses. The panel met for the first time. I know a number of colleagues of mine have been asking for an update, and as Edward had said, we've waited because we hear from businesses they want certainty. We didn't want to go out with something, make an announcement, get businesses geared up, then all of a sudden things change. So for us, yesterday was that key day, as the Prime Minister said. Hopefully this is the last lockdown, but and that's when the tsunami is going to hit us with all the challenges that we've touched upon. But you know, we just don't have the level of resource that's required. We've upped the team from 6 to 10, as Edward said. And again, that's small businesses that have been supported through that process, the information officers. So there's a range of both people and activity to support businesses. And then obviously they've got, as Edward said, the grants and the bounce back loans, but they can only go on for so long. And a very quick point, Chair, those businesses that do remain open, if I use the hospitality retail sector, they're saying to us, it's pointless. I mean, takeaways, for example, which do employ a number of people across the city, are ones that don't qualify for any support. Hence why we had the open grant scheme, which was announced, I think, a week or so ago. If you look at the intervention around the supply chain grant, we'd heard from those people that are not just working from home, but businesses supporting weddings and so forth, that had been hit the hardest. So wherever we've supported those small individual businesses.
Ben, you want to come in, Ben?
Yeah, I was just going to add, in terms of what Edward said, Ben, the large majority of grants are being made available to businesses who have been forced to close, but the majority of those are small businesses. But there are other grant schemes still available to businesses who are open and still undertaking work. So, for example, there's a scheme under the name of a productivity grant, which is utilising European money. Even though we've left Europe, we still have some money to spend. So businesses, mainly manufacturing businesses, small businesses, can access grants up to £12,500. And we're looking to try to extend that to keep that funding flowing. We're looking to put in place a low carbon project, which will also end up providing grants to small, medium-sized businesses to put in interventions to make their businesses more green in terms of operations. So there are other schemes in place or under development, whether that's through European money, through some of the other discretionary funding which sits at the city region level. So it's not just about businesses who've been forced to close, but there are some other grant schemes available for those smaller, medium-sized businesses who are trading and wanting to invest in their businesses as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I just make, thank you very much for that information, guys. Ed, if you could...
Councillor Smith, Richard wanted to just come in.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry, Richard. I do apologise.
Oh, river man, no problem. Just to add on to that point, as well as the information officers, we've got teams from our Health Protection Service and Environmental Regulatory Service and Licensing, City Centre ambassadors. And all told, they've just done under 11,000 visits to small businesses, majority of those independent. That is about looking at COVID secure aspects, but also sharing business support guidance, support on the grant systems as well. So over nearly 11,000 face-to-face visits in addition to the information officers as well.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you, and apologies for that, Chair. Sorry, Richard, I didn't see you. Yeah, thanks very much for that information, guys. Ed, if you could include that unemployment metric in it was either the weekly or the monthly status reports that you send us, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Auckland?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the very interesting presentation and all the hard work that you're doing. My question is about the balance now between discretionary funding and the government tied funding. It seems to me that the discretionary element has moved in the right direction. I doubt central government could either please me totally with how much discretion they give to local government, but has it moved in the right direction? How much more should be done? Because if we've got identified need and discretion, presumably we'll find it a lot easier and doing the right thing to get more money out of the door to businesses that need it. So the ones that we've identified, but £1,000 for a takeaway business, that might not be sufficient to keep them going. So where's that balance heading? Sorry, yeah, I got the second question, which is just this trend, which I think is longer term now, but the housing market seems to be at last perhaps moving out of London. That we're not going to return to I don't think, you know, to always being in meetings face to face. We'll do a lot more like this. That will help. So more remote working. We have got some good office development in the heart of the city now. So I'm just thinking, would you agree there is some opportunity there for Sheffield? And also an opportunity which you've touched upon for district centres. And I don't know about anyone else, but you know, there's an odd thing, Chair and everybody. I don't wish to minimise for a second the predicament that many of our citizens in Sheffield face and the difficulties in deprived areas where, like me, I'm sitting in one room for a Zoom. We can have somebody upstairs with education. The other councillor Auckland can be on another meeting. The broadband works and all the rest of it. I don't minimise that, but this is a situation in which actually households have, on balance, have saved money. And I imagine the difficulty as things get loosened is that we'll all be straining at the bit to get out. So are we making any plans to catch that tide of pent-up demand, and I guess particularly how that might work out locally, thinking about the local centres, the local parks, outdoor events, as it's mainly outdoors? Have we started thinking about that? And my final question is the statistics, and I'm sorry if I missed it in the presentation, about telephone calls that are being handled. Do we have an outgoing telephone operation of you know, this issue about businesses are closed, you can't contact, and doing a lot of publicity? Is it reaching everybody that it could, as outdoor an outward bound telephone operation being considered? Is it feasible? Would it be worthwhile trying if we're not doing it already? Helpful suggestion, possibly. Thank you, Chair.
If I very quickly first, if that's all right, Edward. picking up the grants issue, no, as I said, Councillor Auckland wrote to the government last May, and it wasn't just Sheffield, local authorities up and down the country. We had members of Parliament from all political persuasions raise individual cases that they're picking up. And as I said earlier, I picked up a lot of traffic from politicians of all political persuasion around the issues that businesses were facing. As I said earlier, I'm grateful to the city region, the leaders there and the mayor for allowing this flexibility and pick up the gaps that we've just gone through. You're right, Councillor Auckland, when I said to that takeaway, you know, we're just going to be giving you up to £1,000 depending on that threshold. It doesn't go far enough. There's a stonemason that I went to visit just before the lockdown up at Loxley, for example. Again, the resource doesn't go far enough, but where we can, through you, Chair, we've tried to support as many businesses as we can. And if we don't allocate all the cash, there might be an opportunity to go back and top up some of those businesses if we have any cash left. Regarding your point of optimism, I welcome that, Councillor Auckland. Over the last 2 years, we've seen 13 inward investment businesses moving to the city. So yes, you're right. There's been the pandemic and this threat, but we've also seen a number of businesses moving to Sheffield, creating almost 300 jobs in the city. There are businesses, as we've read as well, that we've supported that have expanded and are taking on more people. You also mentioned Heart of the City too. We continue to progress that scheme. We do face challenges. We did sign up, I remember, I think it was at full council, I came to a scrutiny board where Radisson Blue have signed up and a few others. But the challenge remains like every other landlord. We have a pipeline of projects, and we may need to revisit that once we actually get a true picture of the impact of COVID, once these various schemes, be it furlough, the grant regime, the VAT reduction, once these come to an end, that's when we'll start to see a real picture over the coming months of the real impact. But yes, we continue to go out there, promote Sheffield, encourage businesses to invest, and Edward's team also goes out there and supports businesses to expand. So I'll let Edward answer the other question.
Yeah, so I think Maz has answered the number one around the balance of grants, number two around the opportunities out of London. The pent up demand, absolutely. So as some of the things that I think we'll do with the £2 million recovery fund is try and help with things that can have kind of buy local impact. So rather than everybody continuing to shop online in Amazon, helping our local retailers get an online presence, maybe go through a web portal that aggregates up a local area's local independent retailers, so that they have a web presence that is greater than any one of them could probably ever achieve on their own. So I guess the more troubling point behind the question is, yes, there are some people that have saved money, but there's a lot of other people that haven't, and that's the cause of that deepening inequality in the city. But in terms of suppressed demand, there's things in terms of a staycation market, for example. People that perhaps won't be able to go abroad this year, might not have the confidence to go abroad for a while. How can we capture some of that more local indigenous UK market around staycations, given our proximity to the Peak District? So there is definitely a lot of opportunity in there, a lot of thinking to go on. The caveat, of course, is I'm thinking more around the nighttime economy, is doing all of that in the next few months in a way that is safe, so that it isn't sort of a release, but it is quite a measured, sustainable process. Outgoing, I mean, I guess we do have outgoing capacity. So obviously, if somebody emails us or leaves us a message, we contact them. We have an outgoing capacity. What I don't think we're doing yet is buying sort of if you like, kind of call centre capacity and cold calling businesses, I guess I'll ask the team whether they think that will add any value in addition to some of the things we've done before. So I don't know whether we are kind of cold calling people to ring them up. We are certainly emailing them and writing to them, but whether or not the team feel a telephony capacity would add value, I'll take that away. But we do have the capacity to make outgoing calls.
So just thinking of, but it's because it's the contact thing, Chair. There are like we get a local magazine, Activate, which is advertorial, but it's still full of, it's still got intelligence about businesses that are still looking for business in COVID ways. I'm just trying to think of ways of getting over the nobody in situation. Anyway,
I think it will come down to what the quality of the, because we would, to get a data set of business phone numbers, we would probably have to purchase that data. It's whether that data is live and accurate and up to date and is going to add to the contacts and the distribution list that we've already got, I guess, will be the judgment that I'll ask the team to have a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Turpin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Edward and others, for coming to see us again. And I just wanted to say that I think you have been doing a really good job, and Business Sheffield have too. And in particular, I'd just like to say Yvonne Asquith has literally dealt with every single issue that I have sent her way in a very efficient and impressive manner. So I've got 2 or 3 questions really for you, Edward. How are the human resources working for you at the moment? Is redeployment still a big thing? And on a different subject, regarding your reference to office use and stuff in town, I can't think off the top of my head the exact phrase. Have you been feeding into the local plan at all? Because it was a bit of a shock to see how many tiny flats were being planned within an area, a walkable commute to work, and so that you acknowledging that the work patterns are changing. I would just wonder and hope that you have the opportunity to feed into that. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, firstly, thank you for saying that about Yvonne. I'll make sure she hears that or replay this bit of the video, because I think that's really great for you to say that. Thank you. We've got a lot of people across the board that are pulling out the stops, but it's really nice when that's recognised. Thank you. On the HR, the redeployment side, I think we've got now to a steady state. Really, we've had significant redeployments into Business Sheffield to help with some of the gateway, the people answering the phones. We've scaled up rapidly. We've taken more advisors on. So we've got more people into the grants processing side, both in Business Sheffield, which is dealing with some of the non-rate payers and discretionary side, and also into the business rates team who are dealing with the rates side of it. So I think, whilst there are pressures, I think fundamentally we've got a stable resourcing in terms of HR. I think the challenge that I'm sort of alluding to in the slides, where we perhaps need to look again at capacity, is that transition now as we start to think about kind of recovery and renewal rather than just relief. All of that capacity that we have got in is flat out on the relief phase of administering grants and dealing with the here and now. They are also the people that in a perfect world you'd want focusing on some of the recovery effort as well. So we need to be really careful about balancing our capacity, not just on the here and now, but also some of the longer term and the more strategic. And at the moment, I think we're too skewed towards the relief phase, given where we are, where we've been. And over time, we're going to need to carefully manage that resource so that we're not just dealing with the grants. We are also looking at the points Ian was making about what we're doing around that suppressed demand and the district centres and all the rest of it. So that's, I think, what we're starting to really observe as a balance at the moment. In terms of the local plan, I mean, to be clear, the local plan is absolutely not trying to say let's fill the city centre with tiny flats. The local plan is trying to talk about the city centre in terms of a wider mix of more family oriented, young professionals right throughout the age groups, that the city centre is a neighbourhood for all, not just for students or people that want to live in a one-bedroom flat. So yes, there is, city centres are often clusters of 1 and 2 bedroom flats, but we aspire to our city centre to offer a much wider range of choices and tenures for a wider range of the population. We think that's a more sustainable way of living. We think it takes pressure off other sites. So that's what the local plan is trying to get at, in terms of how do you broaden the appeal of the city centre, get more people living in the urban core, which will be good for all sorts of other things in terms of vibrancy and spend and retail and so on. In terms of the impact of COVID, yeah, that clearly is something that we are going to be talking about for many years to come. I think, as I think we talked about last time, it places an absolute premium on the quality of the spaces and places. You know, what goes on between the buildings and around the buildings is as important as what's inside the building. So great quality public realm, great quality green spaces, you know, environmental improvements, so that if you are living in the city centre, and heaven forbid there's another lockdown, you know, you don't feel constrained within a small apartment, that you have got a great quality, walkable, livable, breathable space around you. And frankly, that's critical to the office market. If we're going to attract people out of London, we're going to attract people to come and live and work here or stay here that have been born here, the quality of the environment, not just a load of tower blocks, is what's going to make the difference. And I think that's where Sheffield can really be differentiated. We've got, you know, with the likes of Greater Green, we know we get Peace Gardens, Winter Gardens, we can do it really, really well. We've now got to do it at scale.
If I can just to add on, Chair, on the human resources, as a cabinet team, we meet on a weekly basis, and I have one-to-ones with Edward almost on a weekly basis as well. And I'm grateful to all our staff, not just the staff in Business Sheffield, as Edward said. We've had staff redeployed, moved from other parts of the council to support another department within the council. So it's been truly amazing, and the appreciation and gratitude to our staff who've gone that extra mile, working weekends, evenings, not having connection, trying to get on. It's been unbelievable, and I'm grateful to all our staff. And I've always said to Edward when we meet, you know, soon these people will need to go back. And I had that question with Edward, do we need to still keep him? And earlier on in the year, he said yes, and that was fed back in. So the organisation is very flexible and supportive to its staff. Picking up the bit on office use, having read just scanned the minutes of the last scrutiny board, I know my councillor colleague, Julie Grocott, and the officers that work with her came and presented on the local plan. There is an issue when government sets some of the national standards, which we have very little influence, but where we can, as Edward had said, if you look at our own scheme on Pinnistone Street, we've made, you know, if you look at the size of those apartments, they're for sale and to rent, but also we put in a clause there that we don't want any investors buying up and then keeping them empty. We want individuals and families that want to live in there. And a couple of schemes that you'll see around the city centre, for example, Eyewitness Works, they've now started construction. Kangaroo Works, which is part of the Heart of the City too, they're out there. And the extension of Greater Green, my colleague and myself went out. There's been a consultation exercise on the extension of Greater Green. We're bringing in another pocket park. And if you look at the future High Street Fund proposal that links Barker's Pool all the way through to Castlegate, continues that thread that Edward mentioned of having good quality public realm and outdoor space. And as we say, we're the outdoor city, and as a number of colleagues remind me, we are the greenest city in the UK. So, you know, it is vital learning from some of the issues that you know, if I lived in one of those apartments, not having the space, the challenges that you face, it's important moving forward that that's recognised. And I do believe we have, as an authority, been ahead of the curve. We do get not just local authorities from the UK popping up, but we do get queries internationally about some of the schemes that we've implemented. So thank you for letting me come in there, Chair.
Thank you.
May I have another question, please, Chair?
Yeah.
A short one to Edward. When you last came and spoke to us, Edward, we discussed and also since about the releasing the potential of the outdoor spaces for events and entertainment, and I see you recognised in one of the graphs the how nightclubs and such have been affected more than others. It's people keep saying that we're all in the same boat. Well, we're not. We're all in the same storm, but everybody has a different boat. And so I just wondered if you'd made much progress on that. I know that basically, I think pretty much after we last spoke, the next lockdown slammed in and changed all of our optimism. But
yeah, no, that's it really. And so certainly some of the contacts that we've had, some of the interest that's been expressed, we've sort of been keeping on ice a little bit so that we can now try and pick it up as part of the recovery fund. So I think you're absolutely right. Almost, we're probably where we were in November. We kind of feel like we're almost getting back to that point now, where now's the time to start looking at, as the weather hopefully starts to improve, you know, longer evenings, people now have a timeline towards recovery. That's when I think we can start the conversation with them about what extra they need to help make that safe and secure and de-risk it for them. I think if we try to have that conversation in December, I think our judgment was it wasn't quite at the right time.
And recently, myself, Richard, and Diana from Edward's team met with the Unite, the nighttime economy group. There are, I mean, we've offered last year to nightclubs, for example, because some pubs can, they have a beer garden, larger pavements in the city centre, but nightclubs were one of those businesses that weren't supported via the national scheme. And we use the council's levers of licensing and planning to allow them businesses to adapt. In some places in the city centre, due to various works taking place, we've had to rejig some of the opportunities. But the challenge is more in our district centres, where the pavements aren't as big, that open space just generally doesn't lend itself for that outdoor seating. So yes, some of the businesses will benefit, as we've seen where we've closed roads off. Devonshire Street is a very good example. I was up there, I think I met yourself and a couple of your colleagues, Paul, Councillor Turpin, in the summer. But as I say, with this recovery fund for district centres, I'm hoping that provides a small opportunity for those businesses to apply for adaptations, where we've allowed parking bays to be suspended. That's a cost. You know, the officers within that department, I know Ben Brailsford's here, that's a loss of income to their budget, which has an impact on something else. But it's enabled a business to have some chairs and tables out there, so they're able to increase their capacity. But that capacity, Councillor Turpin, for example, might only increase by 30 or 40%, having that outdoor space included. And not everybody has that opportunity, as I say. And yes, we're going to be supporting businesses again with those opportunities, but it doesn't reach, you know, the numbers that they require to make a profit. I don't know if Richard wants to add anything on.
Yeah, thanks, Mazza. I think just to pick up on that point, a good example is the outdoor seating. So a process that normally can take anything up to 52 days. To help businesses, we've got that down to just over 5 days, and at zero cost to the business. So if you've got a business and you want to expand, which is going to be more important as we look at the roadmap going forward to reopening, if you want to expand outside your premises, then you can, free of charge, using space if it's available. But also we've cut through that bureaucracy to speed up the process of giving you permission as well. So that's one of the measures we've put in place, along with hiring free barriers to make sure it's safe, and helping you look at practicalities around cover and heating, etc. So in that respect, we're doing all we can, and we are being really flexible around the sort of the process and trying to speed that up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Miskell.
Chair, Councillor Iqbal, I think, touched on some of this, but with increased numbers of people working from home, it's clear that COVID has meant that more people have been spending more time locally and in our district centres. And in my ward, that means Manor Top and Gleadless Town End, and they're really vital spaces. But over the years, they've been neglected and haven't really lived up to their potential. People say to me that they need to see more shops and cafes, things that are really vital to their lives. But instead, many of our district centres are full of takeaways, vape shops and charity stores, and can become frequently prone to antisocial behaviour. So given the new reality of how many of us are now living our lives, what can be done to boost district centres even further? What support needs to come from the city region and central government to make that happen?
I mean, I have similar problems as you, Councillor Miskell, in my ward, the amount of takeaways and hairdressers. And I remember speaking to the head of planning a couple of years ago, saying, you know, the residents here just fed up of seeing, we want to see a mix like everywhere else. But the planning framework doesn't allow us to stop betting officers or hairdressers, or, you know, unless you can definitely prove that one sector is dominant, and it's very difficult to prove that. So we just don't have the planning or the in a sense the licensing powers to stop that from happening. The second bit is businesses. They decide where they think, you know, they're gonna get that income and so forth. But as you rightly said, Councillor Miskell, those inequalities in some of our wards, you know, mine and yours, you know, if you look at the average incomes, they're not even close to the city average. Forget the national average, and it's back to, I think it was one of the colleagues here mentioned around, I think it was Councillor Mayor Richards, who mentioned about the skills strategy, the work we're doing with the city region around productivity, upskilling, getting these inward investment opportunities in. That's what's going to create those opportunities, upskilling folks so they can apply for jobs that pay more and so forth. So there's a number of issues we need to address, but the bottom line is it's down to businesses, and for us using the bit of resource, as you've said, from the city region and the council and the government to try and make those places a lot better as we're working from home. I see my district centre busier than it's ever been, and that's probably because people are working from home, and it's and I'm littered like you are with takeaways, so that's why it seems so busy. But yeah, the challenge is, how do we ensure that more diverse range of businesses are on there? But that's a decision they take. It's for us to ensure that we create the right conditions. This district recovery fund, it's not just a one-off fund, but we as an administration, as you know, want to look at take a more of a long-term view and look at what we can do more to encourage those businesses that aren't there to come in there to create those environments. I don't know if Edward wants to add anything.
No, I think it's a long-term thing, but creating a sense of identity and pride, really understanding what the local circumstances are. Is it parking? Is it a bank closure? Is it the street scene? You know, what is it that's getting in the way? And then trying to systematically work through and remove some of those barriers so that we do create the environment where more people are supported to try it, to open up, to give it a go, I think in terms of the national point you mentioned, business rate legislation is one of the biggest impediments to the high street. So we have a situation, as you well know, where online retailers are not paying the same corporation tax, are not carrying the same property costs and business rate burden as the high street and the independents that we want to support and cherish. And we have the perversity where local government and increasingly adult and social care is paid for through business rates. So places with high demand but weaker economies, like larger northern cities, you have a completely inappropriate funding mechanism through the business rate base. So just rebasing, restarting, getting a fairer, more equitable way of business rates is absolutely critical for the country and the high street. The reason there's a lot of charity shops is because they get 80% relief, so they're one of the few people that can afford to go in, and the landlord would rather somebody in paying the rates liability than have it empty. And then you've got the betting shops and the big national chains, because small independents are struggling against their online competitors from the get-go because of the unfairness of the business rate system.
Thank you. Councillor Masters?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ed, for the presentation. I mean, you've obviously focused a lot on supporting businesses through COVID, and that's absolutely right. But your presentation mentioned a lot about stimulating growth, stimulating confidence, stimulating demand, without giving many concrete examples about how you will stimulate. I mean, you have touched on some of them. I mean, creating a better environment by the Greater Green and other initiatives like this. You've given one really good example with this freelance cultural consortium about how you're supporting people to maintain their skills and moving forward with the future. So they're actually practicing, and I think people would prefer that. Have you got any other examples about some concrete initiatives that are going forward to help people like this?
Yeah, and Richard and Ben might chip in here. So, I mean, I think there's an issue of kind of brevity and trying not to spend all night kind of giving the presentation. But I think practical examples will range from some of the things we're doing in the city and the district centres to physically help businesses reopen. Some of the things Ben mentioned in terms of some of the non-business rate recovery grants, so the productivity grants, the support available to help businesses move online and gain new customers. The point around the £2 million fund is that we want to invite proposals as well. So it's not all about ideas that the council's had. We want to throw the ball open and let people come to us about what they want to do in their local area. But some examples that I think the sort of territory we'll get into, for example, we know through some of the temporary transport measures, I'm thinking of Kelham Island, for example, where we put in place some temporary blocks on the road to create more walkable, bikeable, pedestrianisation spaces. Some of those are still in, some of them are very popular, but when you walk down there, and it's the same in some district centres, it still feels like a road with a bollard in the middle of it. What I would like to see us do over time, if some of those changes are going to become permanent, is to put in grass, put in features, put in event space, so that people can reclaim some of that redundant carriageway and use it for outdoor, whether it's cafes, pavement licensing, that sort of thing, or whether it's just as a space with a bit of astroturf and an extra bench or something. So where we've put in hard infrastructure measures as a result of some of the temporary transport measures, now coming back and using this additional discretionary funding to animate those spaces, get people using the spaces that are being created, I think is an area that will lead to some quite interesting opportunities. So Richard and Ben, were you going to add anything on Mazza?
I think just to add on that point, Edward, I think it is a big opportunity, particularly outdoor spaces, because consumer confidence is going to be at an all-time low. We know, we've seen the roadmap, we know potentially when the sort of doors are reopening, but we're still going to be low on confidence and cautious. And using outdoor spaces, as Edward said, to green up, encourage people to dwell outside, to meet outside, that's a big way forward. And I think it was Councillor Turpin talked about it on one of his questions around events. So a great example is Hillsborough, where tramlines has been in Hillsborough now for 4 years, I think. And you can already see that ripple effect of tramlines being in Hillsborough, how it started to transform the businesses in Hillsborough Centre. So you've got coffee shops in there, you've got a couple of really good quality independent bars, you've got a real uplift in the kind of offer because the demand's there now. So we can utilise these outdoor spaces by putting events in across the city in areas now. So I think there's a big opportunity coming out of COVID to celebrate these areas and these communities. One of the challenges, and I suppose a nice challenge to have, is if we do come out of this in June, we're going to have probably 6 or 7 months worth of community events to cram into 3 months towards the end of the year. So we've got to manage that process and make sure we do it safely, but it's a big opportunity as well.
No, I agree with you over that. I suppose I was thinking, because that was more or less covered, I was thinking more of your support, how you're supporting individual businesses through them, like the freelance scheme. It just seems such a good idea, keeping people skilled up so they're prepared for when the opportunity arises. But that's fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, as Edward said in his presentation, there are the home grants as well. So that there's the freelancer grant, that those that are working from home. So we've tried to cover a broad range of people to try and give them that lifeline to help them through this difficult period. And as we meet with the various groups, the Cultural Consortium will continue to meet. We're meeting with Unite and many others to look at what more can we do to support these businesses to open safely and give people like us the confidence to go back in there and shop. And there are a number of consultations out there. I know Edward touched on Kellam. Connecting Sheffield provides us with a really, really good opportunity to green those spaces, enable more space for cyclists and so forth. So there are a number of schemes across the city that we're consulting on that will, in a sense, improve that outdoor space, make that more attractive and livable. So yeah.
If I may as well, so I think it's a really important question. What I was trying to say when I talked about kind of that the transition from relief measures to recovery measures and how we need to manage that carefully. So what I mean by that is a lot of the focus to date through the government support and by necessity the local support has been about grants, just get it into the businesses, hit the bottom line, keep them alive, keep them on life support. What I think I'm signaling is that we're getting to that tipping point now where there will become a point where we have to stop just giving grants to anybody to keep them alive and start investing a bit more speculatively in businesses that are trying to change, to adapt, they're looking to perhaps diversify away from something where the market is declined. They want to invest and reskill and train their people or their equipment to help them get into a new market because they've spotted the changes that are coming. And how we move from a regime of grant support to anybody to grant support for specific outcomes and helping people that have got a new market or have got an opportunity, whatever that might be. I think that's what I'm sort of trying to signal, that we're in that. I think we're in that kind of transition period where we move away from the universality of grant regimes to something that is a bit more selective and purposed around a business's venture or new idea and what they want to do and what the impediment is to allow them to do it and where can we help remove the barriers.
Yeah, you've understood my question. Thank you.
And the information officers, they've been key as well because they've been asking those questions to business as well, Councillor Masters. It's been really refreshing to hear back because I thought they were just going to go out there and say, to be COVID secure, you need to ensure you've got a mask, sanitize and so forth. They've gone well beyond that. They look at your business model. Do you need to adapt? Pivot is the word that's been used. Are there pieces of equipment, for example, regarding what Ben mentioned around productivity? Something simple as having 2 tills at one end of the shop and one at the other end, just to ensure that they can survive. But the information officers have been crucial to hearing and listening to businesses on how they see themselves coming out of this pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maroof indicated you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, please forgive me. I might have missed it. They might have been in the presentation, but in particular, what I'm mostly concerned about, and if I have missed it, then it's worth re-emphasising. I think anyway. It's predicted that the unemployment rate is going to be highest amongst the under 25s, which is quite alarming, really, because we do have a fairly young population in Sheffield as well, and a lot of people with lots of skills which might be out of date as a result of that. Can I ask, just following on from what Councillor Masters said earlier, what stimulation measures and what actual measures are we actually putting in place to anticipate that demand from these young people who clearly are feeling very disillusioned, because most of them are on, probably some of them are on short-term contracts, etc. anyway. So this is a grave concern for us. I mean, and something that we should be looking at putting together almost immediately, really.
Yeah, I mean, the council has always taken apprenticeships on. I remember many years ago when we first introduced the 100 apprenticeship program, we had the national scheme which ensured that those young people that received the GCSEs A to C grades were able to then progress. Those that didn't have the grades, in a sense, were left out there with nothing to do. So we introduced the apprenticeship scheme, and then my cabinet colleagues working with my wider colleagues looking at what more can we do. In our contracts, we're ensuring that A, we're using the local supply chain, B, we're ensuring that they take on apprenticeships. And I know my colleague Councillor Paul Wood, for example, announced 30 odd new apprentices being taken on by the housing department. There's the national program, which is, I think it's called Kickstart. The issue that we picked up very early on was that if you wanted to benefit from this scheme and take one of these young people on, you needed to take 30 on. So if I was a small business that may take on an A apprenticeship or two, I was excluded. So the chamber ourselves got together very quickly, set up a process to ensure that we take on that bureaucracy. So if that business wanted 2 apprentices, we can then passport them through this gateway process. So we take on that 30 and then distribute them to those businesses that wanted an opportunity to take these apprentices on. The other issue we picked up was apprenticeships that were being picked up this year due to the social distancing measures and the size of business units and so forth prohibited businesses. I know my colleague Councillor Dunn, if she was here, Jane Dunn, she takes on an apprentice every year. This year, because the space isn't big enough, it's been a challenge. She's upset she can't support a young person. So you're right, there are some challenges, but as I said earlier, there is an employment and education and skills strategy that my colleague Abdesam has gone out on consultation on. That doesn't mean the activity is stopped. I know she's in regular conversation with the technical colleges, the Sheffield College, to look at what more we can do to support these young people. But you know, part of Edward's presentation, if you look at the amount of vacancies that are advertised, there's very few. It's usually in a supermarket or in a call center. So once the economy opens back up, we're hoping, you know, we can continue to get businesses to take on these young people. But the challenge isn't just young people. You know, there are adults as well that are facing similar challenges as young people. I mean, just very quickly, if I can, Chair, the RISE programme, which we have, that supports student retention. I know we've increased the numbers on that, and we're also asking some of those students to support some of our young people, so that there are a number of initiatives. And for us now, we've got the roadmap. It's looking at what more we can do to get these young people and the wider population back into work.
Can I quickly just come back, Chair, just very quickly. Thank you, Councillor Muzzer, for everything that you've said there. But my question was specifically around the under 25s and what measures are we putting in place now, like helplines, working with the careers service, etc. Because there are some very, very concerned young people out there that are really, really worried and stressed by this situation. And I'm assuming there is a link between them and the career service or a helpline that they can talk to. A little bit like when clearing takes place and there are people put in place who can advise as to how they can move forward and etc. Things like that. That's specifically what I'm looking at. I'm grateful for your comments on what you're trying to achieve in the future, but this is the present I just wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, that's best answered again if my colleague Councillor Abdesam Mohammed was here with her officers. It's not something that I have that level of detail that you requested. I don't know if Edward has, if there's anything he can comment on.
No, I mean, I think as this conversation has been going on this evening, I've become aware just how kind of the people-centric side of it's missing from the narrative. The title of the presentation was the Business Recovery Plan and Update, but I think in doing that, we've not done justice to the people and skills and employment side. So I really would encourage a more kind of a follow-up session where Councillor Mohammed and Andrew Jones, the Director for Lifelong Learning and Skills, can come. So, for example, I do know that the City region have used some of the first 2 years of gain share funding to put in place an apprenticeship hub, which is designed to, as Mazza said, to pick up some of those young people that haven't been able to sadly finish their apprenticeship and be some of that clearinghouse and that matching between supply and demand of apprentices. But to be honest, to do it justice, I think you need Andrew here who can go into it in more detail than I'm able to.
Thank you. I mean, in the past, we've done job fairs and things where we've picked up these kind of people, but obviously we're not able to do that. So I get your point, Councillor Maroof, and I'm sure the officers will take it on board. There's just one more person, Councillor Richards, who's indicated.
Sorry, just coming back again because I set off on the skills thing in the first place, was that taking up what's been said and the fact that we're all obviously concerned about it, can we put this down as an item we would like to have at a future scrutiny committee meeting about skills development, both short, medium and long term, and the whole thing from the young people, which Councillor Maroof is worrying about, through to the older people who I'm worrying about, and everything in between. And we have to have a 6-hour meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And Alice is here. I'm sure she'll make note of that, and we'll get it on the future work programme to get the skills officers here to update us on that. Thank you. That's all now. That's all the questions from us. I'd like to thank officers for coming at short notice, because you were originally due to come next month and you stepped in for me, and it was much appreciated. We obviously, there's a lot of concern and worry about all this, so if the committee agrees, I think that we should keep it on the work programme and perhaps ask you to come later on in the year and give us an update of how things are and the city centre and the future of the businesses. Is committee in agreement with that? Yeah.
It's an excellent idea, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. If you like, officers and Councillor Iqbal, you're now dismissed. We're now moving on to the next part of our agenda. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So the next part is the work programme. Alice, I know. Sorry, it was very remiss of me to thank you, Alice, for stepping in at short notice. Also, Deborah is not very well; she's ill. So Alice has stepped in at very, very short notice. So I'll I don't know if you've got any detail for us. So,
well, to say, I mean, it's been confirmed that you can expect. I mean, you've only got one more meeting after. I'll go back. You've only got one more meeting after today scheduled in, and it's been confirmed that waste, fly tipping, littering will be on that as you've asked. That was the swap around. So yes, that's why you know, thanks to Mazza and Edward for that, and there will be waste. But obviously, listening to what the questions were, there's a couple more things that have come through. Certainly, the sort of recovery, economic recovery coming back, that's, I would say, kind of a 6-month thing, or maybe it's one of the first things you do in the new municipal year. In terms of the skills and education, skills, education strategy, hearing from Abtisam and Andrew Jones, that feels like it's information needed fairly soon to kind of plug the gap from what you were listening to today and some of the issues. Whether we can try and get something brief for you on the 23rd as well, that would mean two items. But if that's what you want as a committee, I can certainly go away and see what we can do, Chair, if that's something.
Well, I'll put that to the committee, because as you can see, one item takes a long time. So I don't know if the committee wants to do that. To give it justice, perhaps it's perhaps as well we have it on its own. Yeah. What does anybody think? Yes, I've got some nods. Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think the waste, and I mean, we did touch on skills today. I think the waste and fly tipping one, as you suggest, Chair, could be quite a lengthy item.
Yeah, I think it might be, to get a good report, it might be wise to give them a bit more time.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, Chair. So we'll stick with your waste, and obviously I say it's the last one this municipal year, but the way this year, it's the last nearly 12 months has flown by, I think we'll be suddenly backing it all again in June and July. So I feel like you've actually got your first two items already, whoever is the committee and the chair for next year. And then, you know, it was a delicate balance recommending things for the next year, but I think you're right, skills and education, particularly that gap, and more may be known by then as well. Yeah. And so I'll make sure that those two are fed into being fairly high as potential items. So we're coming back of what you've just heard today about economic recovery, but adding in a lot more about skills as well.
Councillor Miskell wants to come in.
It's just with regards to waste. If we're to do that at some point, is it also possible to have some performance data on kind of fly tipping, removal and bin collections? And if the response to that is that no, it's kind of confidential, can we have a closed session if need be? For that, which I think it'd be really good to see. And also, I think, you know, we know that Sheffield litter pickers do some amazing work throughout the city, and it would be wonderful to also have them here, because I think that they are experts in much of this. No doubt they've got lots of wonderful ideas about how we can make improvements, and presumably also their own grievances and a little gripes about what could be improved.
Right, well, seeing as we've got a lot of litter pickers around the city, perhaps there is a group that first started. Alice, I don't know if you could, or if anybody can shed light on them, but they started off, and I remember them being in the city centre. I remember them seeing them in Norfolk Park when it was the flyover. They were there picking litter up then, and I think they were one of the first groups. So it might be wise looking into who was the first ones to set up, because they'll have lots of experience, rather than, because I'm aware, I know in my ward there's lots and lots of groups that have set up now. Councillor Lodge.
Yeah, Chair, I think Councillor Miskell was saying the Sheffield Litter Pickers group, which is like the umbrella body that they all sort of sign up to.
I think yes.
I think we'd have to. Right, I think we'd have to limit the representatives, otherwise there'd be more litter pickers than litter out there. I think.
Yes. Yeah. When I think about it, they had Ivy's jackets on that said Sheffield Litter Pickers. Yeah, I think they were the first ones that to start. Yeah.
If
So
I can, Chair, that's kind of our role.
for us.
Go away and find the right people to come to the meeting for you.
Just going
Thank
to
you.
say, I have their contact details and I'll pass them on to Alice.
That's very useful. Thank you, Councillor Richards, because I'm aware that Alice is doing 2 jobs at the minute. Thank you. So that's it. That's all. Unless anybody else wants to add anything, I want to thank you for your attendance today. And our next meeting is on the 23rd of March. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.